WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by JW Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We Should Know is on the air. It's Tuesday at 2:30 each and every Tuesday. Also, there's a replay of this show at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, Thursday, Star Communications TV, WCLN Radio. We're talking with Dr. David Goodin. David, you're the superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Last conversation we had was over a year ago. You just had taken the realm, and probably one of the hottest times of issues that somebody could come in and say, I'm going to take the wheel of this vehicle, is when COVID was going on. We had virtual learning going on. Masking was the big thing. I recall a comment, and it was in the local media, Sampson Independent, in fact, is that comment just struck me, and I wanted to repeat it as I introduced you this morning. Right. And it was when you were asked about what your thoughts were, what your goals were. Your response was, it's not complicated. We're going to be the best face we possibly can be. Sometimes that means that things have to change. We move around some things, we adjust, but the goal is never going to change. It's going to be the best educational system for our children. Are we still on that path?
I believe we are. I believe we are. It's in it, and I think that I can say that confidently because that hasn't changed for me, and it certainly hasn't changed for the team that I work with. I think as long as you are able to keep that as your focus and as your true north, if you will, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be challenges to moving in that direction. But as long as you can keep that as your focus and not get caught up in the more mundane aspects or the obstacles or challenges that you face, if you can keep that as the guidance or your focus, you can continue to move your organization forward, because there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be things that are going to, because quite frankly, human nature is human nature. Folks are in general afraid of change. They like things the way they are. They like knowing how things are going to work and but change is inevitable. It happens whether we want it to or not. The task is the challenge is to try to keep that change focused in the right direction. It's going to happen whether we want it to or not. Whether it's internal pressure or external pressure, there's going to be change. And so I think I can still. I can still stand behind that our goal is to have the best educational system in Sampson County that we can have. But the question is, for why? Mm-hmm. Why do we want to do this? Mm-hmm. And really, it really boils down to the kids. These children deserve our best effort. They deserve us to make decisions that are in their best interest. With the understanding that those decisions will oftentimes run into opposition with the status quo, because that's, as I said, human nature is we want comfort, we want stability, we want to know how things are going to work, and I think if anything, COVID showed us as we went through that is that. It can't always be like that. You've got to monitor, you've got to adjust, you've got to, try to make the best of the situation that you're in. But as far as my coming in during COVID, it wasn't too bad here. I think some of the prior superintendent probably had to deal with more issues in Sampson County than I did. I just pretty much came in and continued to steer the ship the direction it was already going. Now, I do know that it was rocky because in my past, in my life up in PA, when this all started, it was tough. And I'm sure that the school board, the leadership here in the county, and all levels of leadership had to face those uncertain challenges because it was unprecedented. What do you do? You know, there's no roadmap here. How do we handle this? So, you know, if anything that we should take away from that experience is that we can do it. We can adjust. We can overcome. We can move forward. But having said that, we find ourselves now, especially in the area of education, that we need to make up lost ground. We did lose a couple of years there, and it's not going to be made up in a couple of years. You're talking about a lot of learning loss for our kids, and I think that's kind of reflected in the scores. You know, some of the scores that are going to be coming out here later in the fall. But it's not just us. As I talk to other superintendents in the state and actually nationally, we're all facing the same challenges. How do you make up for this learning loss? How do you and we found that there were good things that happened with online learning or not being face to face, but there are also challenges that came along with that too. And so we're definitely in the process of trying to overcome those challenges. So there are some things that we are doing within the county that are really trying to mitigate that loss and try to put those structures in place that we can move forward and do the best we can for our kids. Because our work isn't just to, and I've said this before, if it weren't for the kids, we have no reason to exist. If it's not for the kids, why do we need a school board? If not for the kids, why do we need administration? Why do we need, it all exists to move these kids forward and give them the best opportunity, the best chance for their life that we can possibly give them. So I think those challenges have culminated in a realization that we can overcome obstacles and we can move forward. But we've got to keep the focus of why we're doing this. It has to be, you have to be part of something bigger than yourself. And that's really what has driven me throughout my career. And it's when I feel that I'm not part of something bigger than myself that I get discouraged. And so, you know, the challenge is to make sure that you keep your focus and that you're recognizing that we're doing this for a reason. There's a reason. And it truly is to give back to our future generation and do the best we can by them.
One of the things that strikes me as we're talking here is that when I look at education, seems to have been two kinds of dichotomies of thought. One of them is that education is something to teach you how to think or what to think about. The other is that it's this idea of here's what you should or shouldn't do, that it's more of a control kind of thing. In today's environment, how do you put forth that effort of teaching people good thinking skills about subjects, about matter, about information? You know, what is this math about? Why should I be focused on science, technology, engineering, and math? Why is it so important to me? How do you implant that idea in their mind that think about it? This is some things that will help you develop and design a future that we could never imagine. How do you still have that inspiration there?
Well, you're speaking to relevancy. You know, and I've often found it in my career, pull students aside and say, why are you learning this? Why are you doing this? Sometimes they can tell you. A lot of times they can't. And I think there's some of that is natural to a child. They don't see the bigger picture. And that's why it depends upon adults to make sure that we're doing our best to make it relevant. And some of the ways you do that is try to make sure that what you're doing in the classroom, you're tying it to real world expectations. And I've used this example before, and I never really thought about it, but one day I was trying to do some work up on the top of my house, and it's a 2-story house, and I needed to buy a ladder. And I'm trying to figure out, well, how big of a ladder do I need? And my son was out there with me, and he said, well, it's the Pythagorean Theorem. And he said, that's how you figure it out. And he did, and he showed me how to figure out how big of a ladder I needed, because you know, it had to do with, okay, well, what's the distance from the top of the roof to the ground, and then how far out do you need to be? So you've got the 2 angles. So how do you get figure to third? That's a Pythagorean theorem. And when you can, and I never forgot it, because he understood the relevancy of what he was learning in math. And I just never forgot that example. And that's our challenge as educators, to try to bring that relevancy into play. One of my concerns, and you hit on it just a little bit, is that we want to teach kids how to think, not necessarily what to think. We need to teach them how to think, how to be critical learners, how to be critical of that which they're taking in. And, you know, and there's a challenge, because not only, there was a time when you and I went to school, the teacher was the authority. That's where you got your information from. Nowadays, there's all kinds of outlets where you can get information, and a lot of it is inaccurate or wrong. And so, you know, the challenge for us as educators is to try to bring that relevancy in that, so that it has meaning for kids. And it is a challenge. It's a challenge for all educational systems. You know, I was a former history teacher, and I don't know how many times kids would say, well, why do we have to learn that?
Hold that thought. We're going to take a break and come right back after this break and continue the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We're talking to the Superintendent of Sampson County Schools, Dr. David Goodin. Please call a friend. Stay tuned. We'll be back in one moment.
If you run a business, you need sales. To get sales, you need customers. To get customers, you need exposure. Let our team of experts craft and produce the perfect video ad to reach your intended audience while making the most of your advertising dollars. Call 1-800-706-6538 or visit starcom.net to contact our Star Communications production team and get your business moving to the next level.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. We're coming up on the second segment here of a show called We Should Know. I'm JW Simmons, your host. We're talking with Dr. David Goodin, who is the Superintendent of Sampson County Schools since 2018, I believe. It's maybe that's when you got the nod. Was in.
No, let me think. Let's see. I think I've been here about 18 months. So that means I think I started in February of 21, actually.
Yeah, and it goes so fast.
It does. One
of the things we were talking about is we went off air, and I want to kind of open this segment with this, I guess, observation, is that you're looking at a total of 18 schools to include the early college, over 7,000 students, over 500 teachers and other employees, one of the largest counties in the state, geographically. In our previous conversation, when you first came and you were looking at the scope and dynamic and trying to figure out, you know, where, as still saying goes, where the rough spots are and that kind of thing, we talked about it would take a while to get there. Have you had an opportunity literally to look at and it's a weighty subject, but when you think about it, many people, and today, in our conversation, I'm sure teachers will be looking at this. What do you think? What is your thought? You know, we talked about, you mentioned the idea of thinking about a subject instead of telling people what to think. What is Dr. David Goodin's thought about this system, the way it's set up? Because where you came from, one of the points I recall you made to me was you had to really get where you understood this funding system in North Carolina.
Right.
Totally different than Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to toss that out as maybe to discuss in this segment.
Well, there are a lot of challenges that you face just because of geography here in this county. Transportation's one of them, and delivery of services. That is a challenge. In addition to the fact that while Sampson County is one school system, you've got 4 very distinct districts within this county. Well, 5, I guess, if you include Clinton City, and very unique. Each area has its own culture, and it's clear to me about that culture. And so the coordination of those different cultures, the norms, is a challenge. I could probably list off a whole boatload of differences that exist between the 4 different districts, but that is a challenge, trying to coordinate those different expectations from the different groups, not the least of which the ability to share resources is very limited here just because of geography. We have, like many other systems, we definitely have a labor challenge here. We don't have teachers, and that is a challenge, but it's not just in Sampson County, it's across the nation. We have, and it's a challenge. And then on top of that, you've got the state that is imposed. For example, there's classroom student caps that we have to abide by. So, for example, in the early grades, you might have a cap of only 19 in a classroom. That's all fine and good if you can find teachers. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing right now. How do you provide education when you don't have teachers? We have schools that don't have math teachers, or we don't have enough math teachers. And it's a challenge, how we're working around that. So as far as the county system as a whole, I have found that trying to coordinate and keeping everybody on the same sheet of music has been a challenge. Most of these districts are fiercely independent, and they've done it this way, and they want to continue doing it their way. And so the challenge for me has been to try to make sure that we're keeping, as we mentioned in an earlier segment, what is our real focus here, and that's our kids. And providing them the best education we possibly can. But there are mitigating factors that we've got to navigate. And right now, one of the biggest ones is just finding employees. I'm pleased to say that many of the employees that we've hired for the classroom to this date I think are going to be very successful, and they're going to do a good job for us. We just can't find enough. And that is a challenge, but it's not just my challenge. A neighboring county, I was just talking to a superintendent this morning. He's got like 148 teacher positions he can't fill. He doesn't have anybody. And that is a challenge for any system. And it's not like I can combine schools because geographically, we're a large county. When I first got here, I couldn't understand why they were giving me a car. Well, I understand it now.
Yeah.
Because I think in the little bit of time I've been here, I think I put on almost 30,000 miles on this vehicle, just doing my work, just traveling schools, traveling the county. And so that is definitely a challenge. But I think that overall, we have a really good team, and these people that are working here are dedicated, because they're certainly, for the most part, not doing it because of the high pay. They do it because they care about kids, and they want to see and they want to do something that's bigger than themselves. And that's really what a school system is. It's being part of something that's bigger than yourself, and moving in that, continuing to move in that direction. But I have to tell you, it's coordinating such a large community is it's a challenge. And then on top of that, trying to find employees is definitely a challenge for us as a rural county, but all counties are experiencing it, and the nation's experiencing it. We have, I believe I was at a meeting last year and up at ECU, and they graduated last year one secondary math major for the whole university. They graduated one. It's hard to, so we may be looking at a situation where we have to begin to adjust our model out of necessity. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to look, but we have to make some adjustments, because I can have classes that don't have teachers. There's got to be somebody in there. And we've got to figure out some way to make sure we're delivering educational services to our kids. But there's no doubt that is one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now.
The dynamic of the school system as it's set up is interesting, and the way a superintendent looks at it has kind of a bifocal view. You have a multiple, should I say, governance boards. You've got the county governance board, which is your county school board. You also have to look at the state with a whole nother state superintendent and what her expectations is now, along with the board that she is following, which is an appointed board.
Right.
These governance folks, when they step into this role, there's not any expectation of education background, of depth of knowledge of what education is. They come and bring somewhat of a design of governance of what you're expected, should I say, the playground that you're supposed to play in,
right.
to use a school analogy. How challenging for you is it for somebody like you that's got the background you have in education, that understands where you need to go? How do you do that dance to make sure that you handle the encroachment piece of doing what governance wants you to do, at the same time keeping it within the range of possibility? And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes on that. We'll probably go into the next segment.
And that is the trick, to figure out workarounds. How do you work within the system and work within the governance structure and still achieve your primary objective? I've often used this as an analogy. It's almost like an organization is a mountain, and there are folks at different places on that mountain, and where you are impacts your perspective. I find myself as a superintendent needing to have a very broad, wide perspective. And I'm allowed that because I'm at the top of the heap, if you will. Mm-hmm. But just because I can see clearly, or I think clearly, doesn't mean that everybody else can around me. And that's and that's why in all governance structures, you have somebody, for example, our county manager, for example. Mm-hmm. He has a certain perspective, and he's got to bring that perspective to the county commissioners, and then they have to make a decision. And depending on their decision, whether it's what he thinks should be done or shouldn't be done, he's got to figure out a workaround, because he has an objective that he's got to stay true to. And I'm in the same situation, and every superintendent's in the same situation. How do you stay focused on what you need to focus on and still operate within the governance structure as it exists?
Let's come back next segment, follow up on that. The word will be perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with the superintendent of Sampson County Schools. And school's opening soon. We'll be back in a moment.
At home or away, knowing who is at your door is priceless. Star Communications is here to help with its doorbell security camera by Skybell. Live viewing and two-way audio equips you with the ability to always see and greet anyone that shows up at your door. If this is the kind of confidence you are looking for, call Star Communications today at 1-800-706-6538 to learn more about this intelligent security that you can always depend on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks for being with us. JW Simmons, your host. The name of the show is We Should Know. And we want to remind you each and every week, 2:30 on Tuesdays when the show airs, and at 7 p.m. Tuesday, Thursday on Star Communications, cable channel 16, and that's on the television side. Also uploaded to YouTube, social media platforms, and those kinds of things. We're talking with Dr. David Goodin with Sampson County Schools. Dr. Goodin, again, I want to kind of pause just for a second and thank you for being here and thanking you for your service and leadership. These are crucial times, and this is a crucial role that you play as superintendent. We've talked about some very important things in the first two segments, and as we left the last segment, the word that stood out for me was perspectives. We're about to see our schools open here in this area. Obviously, there's a lot of work that is going on prior to schools opening. It's not one of those things where the principal goes and opens the door and says, the teachers and principals has been working for weeks, if not months, to prepare for this opening. I want to take that word perspective and kind of move it to what parents should know from the superintendent, what teachers and employees that you have oversight of in their workspace need to know from the superintendent, and kind of put some of those thoughts, just kind of frank conversation from you out to this larger population.
Now, we had ended up talking about the significance of perspective, and one of the challenges in leadership is recognizing that there are varying perspectives, but what is the kernel of what everybody's trying to achieve? Parents want their children to be educated. They want their children to be successful. That's their perspective. Teachers also have perspective. Their perspective is, this is their job. They have a content that they are teaching. They have expectations for their children. And so that's their perspective. Sometimes when you have different sides having different perspectives, those come into conflict. For example, you may have a parent or a family who wants something to be done specifically for them because it is in line with their perspective of what we should be doing. And yet it not always can be done. So I find my role oftentimes is to try to find some common ground. Most of the times when I'm called into something to mediate a situation with a parent in a school, my task and really my goal is trying to come to a point to where we can find some common ground. What can we do? How can we best try to meet your needs without stepping on the needs of everybody else, or staying within the line of policy? And policy has a purpose. It provides structure to the organization. It provides direction. And so there are things that a family may want that we just can't do. And so you got these competing perspectives, and a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is try to find some kind of common ground, a win-win, if you will. And that's probably the most exciting part of my job to me. And that's, I think that something that I've grown as a skill over my career. But you know, every group has a perspective. Your administrators have a perspective. Your school board has a perspective. And so, but I think overall, as long as we can ascertain that we all have the same end goal, the task and the challenge is to take those varying perspectives and acknowledge those perspectives as being legitimate, because they are it's your perspective, and it is legitimate. It's just as legitimate as somebody else's perspective. But as an organization, there has to be structure, and you abide within that. So a lot of times, you know, as leaders within the system, we're trying to find how can we meet the needs or fulfill the expectations of our clients, which are families. We're here to serve them. We exist because of them. They don't exist because of us. And so there's a certain customer service aspect to what we do, but that doesn't mean that we can do everything that.
Do you think that the school system does a good job in relaying to parents what their expectations should be of that school system? And I'm saying that in terms of the parent's role in bringing that child to a structure in their life that they are capable of learning. Does parents expect the schools too much of the school system? I'll just drop my child off, you feed them, or you pick them up in my house, you feed them, you look after them. If there's something else needed, I don't know about it. You just make sure that they're taught. Where does that line end, and where does it stop? And have we, as a school system, has the school systems nationally in North Carolina and everywhere created more of a expectation that can't be reached?
Well, I think you and we've discussed this before, that the importance of the family, the importance of parenting, because that's where it all begins. We are an extension of that family. We are not the family. We are an extension of what you hope and want to have for your children. We are not the source of that. We are an extension of it. We serve your family. We support. But the family is that's where student discipline comes in. For example, you know, the students they come to school, and if they've been allowed to grow up as wild weeds, the school's going to have a hard time working with that. And unfortunately, that does happen. It's happened, and that's been the case all along. But you know, certainly we're an extension of the family itself and a support agency for the child. But ultimately, that responsibility always comes back to the family, of what you hope for your children, what you expect from your children. And that's something else you and I talked about earlier, about expectations. And the importance of expectations of what a family expects for their child in their education. No expectations, you're going to get what you expect. And I've seen it in families. I've seen families where the expectation for their child's education is extremely high, and those are your students who usually perform better. And I'm just talking, you know, what I've observed throughout my career. It's not necessarily specific to Sampson County. I think it's just a general observation. And yet you can also tell, you know, that unfortunately there's families that have their own struggles. They're fighting their own demons, if you will. And sometimes that bleeds over into the life of the child. And that's what we get, and that's what we have to work with. And so we do the best we can with that, provide, and try to provide as much support as you can. But it's always a challenge. But we are here to support the families, to work with them, to do our role. But families obviously have a role as well, and it's very important that our families have high expectations for their children, because that a parent is a much more significant impact in the life of the child than I can be, and so we can't understate or undervalue their role, because they definitely have a role. And you're right. Sometimes you have families that want to be more hands off, and they want the school you take care of it. That's your area. And yet I've found that in the more successful families, that's not the attitude. The attitude is school is your job, and do it to the best of your ability. That's our expectation for you, and as a parent, that we expect that. So there's certainly a cooperative element that needs to exist between the school and the family, and I think the best way I can define that is that we're here to serve the schools and I mean serve families, and they're our clients, they're our customers, if you will. And if we can maintain that attitude, I think we can maintain a good working relationship with families. What
I'd like to do, we're fixing to go to another break, but I'd like to maybe follow this conversation in our last segment with this idea of that we're seen oftentimes, because we are in a rural area, as being marginalized or underserved. That's two words that are kind of common threads out there. I'd like to talk about that, and also look at the conceptual idea of what kind of responsibility does that place on teachers that see students quite often. It's just a matter of factuality. Teachers quite often see students more face to face than parents do, and it's hard to accept. So I'd like to kind of move in that plane and kind of allow teachers and parents to get your perspective on those. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Dr. David Goodin with Sampson County Schools Superintendent about key issues facing the school opening this year. We'll be back in a moment.
To get the most out of your electronic devices, you need a strong internet connection and a protected home Wi-Fi network. You need high-speed internet from Star. Star has the fastest, most affordable high-speed internet service available for all your devices. We have no long-term contracts or high-pressure sales. Our service speaks for itself, and switching is hassle-free. We take care of everything with free installation from a local company. High-speed internet from Star. Internet at the speed of life.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. JW Simmons, your host. I want to thank all of those sponsors that support this show each and every week on WCLN, Star Communications TV, Channel 16. I also want to thank those people that mention the show and to me throughout the community. And thank you for sending your emails, comments about the show to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. That's weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. The folks down at the radio station, quite a few times you'll hear the show mentioned. Robert Stroud with the Boogie Shoes Radio Network on Saturday afternoon. Fun time show that everybody's enjoyed now for going on 25, 30 years. Robert's been doing this. Wayne Weeks with the Gospel Hour on the WCLN network. Appreciate what Wayne does and the communication that he offers about guests that we have, and also other folks at the radio station, including Tommy Elliott and Nicole and many others that are part of that staff. We're talking about education today, and we're talking with someone that knows a bit about that. Actually 30 years plus before you came to Sampson County as superintendent. You were up in Pennsylvania, originally from this area. Yep. Dr. David Goodin has come back home to settle.
Yes.
In a very unsettled environment when you talk about education today and how we go about it. The dynamics of it we've touched on a bit. I'd like to maybe this last segment give you an opportunity to speak directly to the teachers, the people that if you have to look at it from that perspective, that work within the frame of design that the governance board here and that you put out to try to carry out that policy, speak to them and how there's a need for a sense of cohesiveness. And I'll kind of open that with, is there a need for more trained psychological counselors in schools? I hear that all the time.
Short answer, yes. One of the results of going through COVID is the deterioration of mental health, and it's a national issue. It's been well documented, and it affected our children as well. It affected our teachers. Months of isolation is not healthy for a human being, and that's what we've gone through. And many of us started working out of our homes, and I can't. I think even to my own experience, I'm not sure how long it was before I went to a restaurant, and did those kind of normal things. And certainly our teachers bore the brunt from their perspective on how to mitigate and how to handle, how to do their job, and how to reach kids in an online format or in a format where it was broken up. You'd have the kids, you might have one group 2 days a week and another group 2 days a week, and it was just very disjointed and stressful. And I think the stress on the system was evident. And but I think in general, the need for social mental health services, one of the things that I see that as far as a concern and a need in the county is even a day treatment program. We have students that really need someone to talk to. They need, for lack of a better word, they need to be in a treatment facility along with their education to help them navigate their own feelings. Mm-hmm. And so that's certainly a need within the county. But our teachers, and teachers specifically in Sampson County and teachers across the nation, they've been worn out through this process, and they're tired. And so one of the things that we really want to do this year is try to really get back to a sense of normalcy, if you will. Mm-hmm. So we're going to try to get back to not business as usual, but get back to an environment that we are comfortable and that we know. Kids coming to school, teachers having their kids in class, students doing homework, being present in the classroom. Those are important aspects of a normal education, and we really need to get back to that. We want to make sure that that our teachers have the skills and to be deliberate in what they're doing within the training that they've already had. They weren't trained to teach online. This was something that was dumped on us within about 2 weeks, and we had to make adjustments, and it was stressful. It was stressful even for me, even though I didn't teach. All the meetings that I had were all online. And even as an adult, it was very difficult for me to stay focused, just meeting online constantly, sitting in my basement. Mm-hmm. That was tough. And so I think that when we come back to school this year, I am truly hoping that we can get to a sense of normalcy where teachers can do what they've been hired to do and what they've been trained to do. And that is really being deliberate about their planning, their instruction, what they're doing in the classroom, making sure students are engaged, because most teachers will tell you on an online environment, students either were not engaged or they struggled to be engaged. And it was tough for the teachers to keep them engaged in that kind of learning environment. So we want to really try to focus on bringing back a sense of normalcy for our teaching staff and for our students, because they also have reacted to this lack of normalcy, if you will. And I think our teachers would tell you that once we did last year get everybody back in every day, kids had to relearn how to be in school, how to interact in person with people. And so we really want to focus on that and make sure our teachers have the support that they need. But we also want to make sure that they have an environment which they can be deliberate about what they've been trained to do and what they've been hired to do, without all the external distractions. Right now, in the county, there's a couple of initiatives that are going on right now that are major initiatives. And one is, one has been mandated by the state, and that's the science of reading, which consists of about 160 hours of training over the next 2 years for our elementary teachers. That's a lot and it's all online, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of stress. But we have to. It's mandated by the state, so it's not like we have a choice in that. But it's good, but it's a challenge. We put in a new language arts curriculum in elementary. Anytime you implement a new curriculum, that's stressful. The teachers are having to learn this new curriculum. We're doing the same thing with our math at the secondary level, and so even though that's a challenge, though, that's what teachers. That's their normal. Implementing curriculum. Planning, being deliberate about their planning. How are they going to make sure that their students are learning, through formative assessments or summative assessments, and what are the strategies that we need to employ to engage our students so that it is relevant for them. And we had talked about it in an earlier segment about the importance of relevancy, but that's what teachers have been trained to do. And so we need to get back to that. And so really I want to do the best we can to bring things back into a normal, a sense of normal operation without all the distractions. And that's going to be a challenge because we're still dealing with the impact of COVID. Right now, I think within the state, the numbers are very high for transmission of COVID. And yet I think that we've kind of crossed that bridge to where you're not seeing the hospitalizations. There's a certain degree of immunity that's occurred within our society that, and I do believe we're going to get to the point that we're dealing with this like the flu.
The one question we'll try to get in before we're going to have to go in just a few minutes here, but I want to get this question in. Do you feel our schools are safe given everything that has occurred in the past few months, to include Uvalde, Parkland, and all the other horrific situations that occurred?
In every situation, in our schools, they're not prisons. They're just not. And yet, having said that, even in prisons, you have violence. So you try to mitigate it the best you can. You make sure your doors are locked. You make sure that you're screening visitors. We are very fortunate to have the support here in the county of the Sheriff's Department that we work closely with within the schools. So you do everything that you can, but there are no guarantees in life. There's no guarantee that I'm going to go get in my vehicle and go home or go back to my office and there's not going to be an accident. There's no guarantees, but you can wear your seatbelt. You can not run that stop sign. You can obey the traffic laws. And the same thing within a school. You mitigate to the best of your ability. You screen your visitors. If there's a report to you of something going on, you investigate. You do that which was within your ability. And I've had parents, and I understand their concern, and they want to know, how can you guarantee my child's safety? Well, It'd be wonderful I could do that, but I can tell you what we're doing. I can tell you how we're trying to mitigate that concern, and keep our students as safe as possible. But we've seen what happens. You see what can happen, and yet you can't lock it down. You just can't. It's not possible. And so we do the best we can, and I do want to give a shout out to our sheriff's department.
Absolutely.
They certainly helped us.
Jimmy Thornton, the sheriff, and all the folks that work there do a tremendous job. And I think you will agree that we're fortunate to have folks of that caliber working for us.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for being with us again today. And of course, I hope as this airs, it will do what we intended it to do, to encourage people to look forward to the opportunity of going back, learning in what we believe to be a very well-qualified, well-staffed organization. And just hope you'll hang with us. Look forward to talking to you again. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dr. David Goodin, Sampson County Schools. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. And again, you can always reach him and call him at his office. And we look forward to seeing you again next week right here as we talk education again. Stay tuned and may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host JW Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.